So welcome on stage, Chris O'Hara.
Thank you. Thank you, Todd. Thank you. Wow.
You have the cowboy hat. I feel shame. I'm not going full Texas.
No, I fully embraced Texas as of about 10
Well,
hours ago.
I am carrying, just so you know. Now, the Fall Guy, I mean, you could say that the TV series was meta, but I don't think there's been a more, I hate that term, but anyway, a more meta movie or project about stunts since Hooper in 1978 with Burt Reynolds. And that was directed by a former stuntman, Hal Needham, and this is directed by a former stuntman, David Leitch. And so going into this huge stunt-filled thing, what was your, say, directive from David? What did he say going in? What are we going to do here?
I think, The Fall Guy is a movie about the career that we have, and so telling that story, and I felt like when we did it, we had the weight of the whole stunt community on our shoulders to kind of make something great and something that, was representing what the old TV show was and kind of bringing it into the new era. But it was just the undertaking of making it all look real, making all of us, the stunt community, look as good as we could be in the light and show everybody really what we do.
Now, you had several big set pieces. The biggest was mentioned there, the 8.5 roll, car roll. Now, I guess the previous one was 7 in the James Bond movie Casino Royale.
Yep.
And years ago, I talked to stunt legend Kenny Bates about a 4.5 roll he did in a movie no one remembers called Bad Company with Anthony Hopkins and Chris Rock. And he said, oh yeah, and when I did it, I was knocked out. It's just, it often happens when I do the roll. So that's got to be a pretty scary thing to undertake.
I wouldn't say that that's, I'm pretty humble. I don't like to, we're not playing up getting hurt. The idea in my mind is that we create the illusion of danger by mitigating the risks. And it looks dangerous and exciting, but it really is calculated. It's the stunts are an art and a science, just like why we're now in the academy, right? It's something that does both. And so you just figure it out and kind of make sure it's safe. The 8.5 rolls on that show was something that was written into a script. And so I don't think any of us get into this business. I mean, I personally don't get into this business to break world records. That's not my goal. So when you see something in there, it was kind of hard to kind of get past because it's a world record. I'm not trying to do that. I said if we can achieve it, that would be amazing. But I think on Bond, it was it had the terrain to help it out, to give the rolls. It kind of was downhill. So it created more energy for it to keep going. We had to do ours on a beach, on flat. So I wasn't sure if it'd be able to be achieved. But my one caveat to that was if we didn't get 8.5 rolls, we were going to still pay homage to Gary McClarty, who was the first one to do a cannon roll on film in McHugh, the John Wayne film.
I love McHugh.
Yeah, and so that was the first time that it was ever done. And so, okay, we don't do 8.5, but we're going to do a roll on a beach and go back to where the first cannon roll was done.
Now, explain to the audience who might not be as stunt literate as you or perhaps me exactly what a cannon roll is.
So a cannon roll is a metal cylinder that's put inside the car. Depending on where you strategically place it on the car will give it a certain effect that you want to that. Back in the day, they used to use black powder charges and telephone poles. So they would put a telephone pole up in there, black powder charge on it, and then that would rocket the telephone pole, which would kind of force the car into a turnover. Now we use pneumatics, so we use air. Still kind of like not the telephone pole aspect of it, but more of a pole that's inside that cannon, and that helps the car flip over. And depending on where you put it, creates something special. And so what we did on Fall Guy for the 8.5 rolls, everything kind of aligned. And it took a lot of testing, and that's kind of where things are won and lost in this business, is the amount of testing. And so we had a chance to do it. We tested 2 times on the beach. We shot it once. It didn't go, according to plan. Everybody was safe, but not the effect that we were looking for. And we had a chance to do another one. And so that last one that you see on film was everything coming together.
And as you were talking about it being a tribute to McHugh, I was thinking it through. It was like, oh, that was actually on a beach. That was shot on a beach in Oregon. John Wayne, he had this little semi-automatic gun. It was really cool. Check it out. And so you did it twice. How many days was this?
Well, the actual shooting was 2 days, and then we had 2 days of rehearsal prior to that, and that was it. Such a big sequence.
And when you're plotting it out, is it matchboxes on, little, mock-up? Is it computers these days? What's the, is it math?
I mean, I think there's definitely math, working hand in hand. Like you don't achieve things in this business without a team. And it's not just your stunt team, it's the team of the whole movie. And so working hand in hand with the locations department, the special effects department, production allowing you to rent these spaces and do the proper testing to support you. It all goes together to having a successful stunt. And so that's something that we had on this particular one.
And was there any other stunt on the show that really stands out as another big moment that's not getting all the love and awards that one is?
I mean, every moment was big.
Yeah.
Big stuff with big consequences. We had, you get the right guy for the job. And so we absolutely had the right guy. The high fall, for instance. That's something that is a little bit of a lost art. There's not a lot of guys who do high falls anymore because also visual effects has come so far to where we can do stuff on cables and controlled falls and stuff like that. But, this was also kind of paying respect to the stunt business. And when it came down to the high fall, we had somebody that was absolutely up to the par to do something like that. Just so happened he was the son of a high fall legend. Bob Brown is in our business, has done every high fall possible, out of helicopters, big buildings, small buildings, on fire, I mean, you name it. And so when I started looking at this high fall, originally it was going to be out of a real helicopter.
Like in Hooper.
Like in Hooper. And so, when you are going through your list of people, that's not a skill set that, everybody has. And so I tried to get Bob Brown out of retirement. And he was close. And then right before Christmas, he goes, I'm not going to do it. And so I'm like, okay, well, who else do I find? And then, after sleepless nights over Christmas break, it came back and, just logistically, it sounds great to do it out of a real helicopter, but the practicality of doing that, the amount of testing it takes to do, it's just not cost effective. And so that's when they put it on a crane and, so nobody really know. I mean, they just CGI the blades in it and it looks amazing. And so that's how we ended up doing it. And once it was a static platform to come off of, it opened up my abilities a little bit, and I had a discussion with Bob, and he goes, my son's ready to do it. And so I had discussion with all three of them, and Bob, Troy Brown is his son, and then myself, and we just talked it out, and I stacked my deck. I brought Bob down to help out with it, and then it was such a come around moment to see that transition, from Bob Brown to legend in High Falls to his son doing something super crazy, not super crazy, but just a very big high fall that he may never get a chance to do again in his career. So it was really great. And another little bit to that was we got the same airbag that Bob Brown had done his last high fall in. Wow. So he sold it to guys down in South Africa, and I tracked that bag down and bought it from the guys in South Africa, shipped it to Australia, and underneath it, it had Bob's last height and he signed it. And so when we got done with the high fall and everybody was safe and we got a great shot, Troy signed right next to his dad. So just having that moment was pretty amazing.
And not to bring it down or on that, little bit of 6 degrees or not so much separation trivia, Lee Majors starred in a movie before The Fall Guy called Steel, and someone attempted to do a world record high fall and died. I can't remember the guy's name. Yeah. But that was a long time ago. On that sour note, we should bring R.J. Casey up here. To present last year's Maverick Stunt Awards recipient, to present Chris with this year's Maverick Stunt Award.
This will match your hat, too. Perfect.
Oh, we all have mics.
Hey, all these awards are pretty hard to come down to the winner. This year was a little easier than most, but there's so many stunt legends. As Chris will tell you, he's gotten to work a lot with them, and there's going to be a lot on the panel. And this year, came down to Chris, the fall guy, and like he said, paying tribute to everybody, and really knowing that, as Todd said, Hooper was the last stunt-centric movie. It was the plot, it was everything around the movie, and it was based on it. And the Fall Guy just crushed it. It's one of those movies that you just can't turn off, because you can't wait to see the next sequence, the next stunt. Ryan and Emily, like the story, everything about that movie was magical. So it was a really insane moment. And then also, there was a lot of generations of stunt people that have made it possible to get stunts into the Oscars, finally. And here's one of the last guys to get that ball into the end zone and make stunts at the Oscars happen. So it was a whole team of guys culminating with you and David, really. And it's an amazing honor to present the Maverick Stunt Award to you, Chris. Thank you. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Well, I guess now it's time. Oops. It's not quite time. Now it's time to bring out the rest of our Stunt Awards panel. And whenever you see me looking at my phone, I'm not going to be cruising the internet. I'm just going to be reading from my notes so I make sure I get this right. First, we're going to bring out Vic Armstrong, who is a stunt legend of about 60 years standing. He has doubled Harrison Ford in numerous movies, including 3 Indiana Jones films. He has worked on a lot of James Bond movies, and he's still working today. Welcome, Vic. No, it's cool. That's cool. And I'm doing this alphabetical. And so next we have Nate Boyer. Is it Boyer or Boyer? Nate Boyer, former Armor Green Beret and NFL player turned filmmaker who directed, co-wrote, and starred in the 2002 movie MVP, and is currently working on a feature documentary about a soldier's journey to Normandy 80 years after D-Day. Oh, there he is. Let's go. Nice to meet you, Nate. Next, we have Shane Habberstad. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Habberstad, sorry. A second-generation stunt person, stunt coordinator, and second unit director who won a Taurus World Stunt Award for his work on Extraction 2, directed by former stuntman Sam Hargrave, and he's teamed with him for the upcoming movie Matchbox. And next, Crystal Hooks, a motorsports expert who has demonstrated precision driving skills in Marvel projects ranging from Avengers Endgame to She-Hulk Attorney at Law to TV shows like Tulsa King.
Gotta make y'all get up.
And next, Noelle Therese Mulligan, nicknamed Nolani Tsunami. She's doubled for actresses including Anne Hathaway, Liv Tyler, Margaret Qualley, and Alexandria Daddario, and earned a nomination for Outstanding Stunt Performance, Emmy, in 2024 for work on the series Fallout. And last but not least, we have Tom Struthers, an award-winning second unit director and stunt coordinator, best known for shaping the action in Christopher Nolan films, including Inception, the Dark Knight trilogy, and Dunkirk.
Congratulations. Right on, Tom.
first I want to throw out to the panel, you know, there's no clear path to becoming a stunt person. I do know that from talking to stunt coordinators, you know, they don't like the term daredevil. They really don't like that. Crazy people want to do these things. How did you guys get into this business? Why don't we start with Vic, since you are the senior member of the panel?
Thank you for that. I think like everybody really in the film business, fate seems to guide you in a certain direction. I grew up knowing a bit about films. My father was a racehorse trainer and a farrier, and one of the horses he trained was owned by a famous 50s actor called Richard Todd. Dam Busters, Disney's Robin Hood, he was Rob Roy. And he used to come and watch his horses gallop, and I was 8 or 9 years old, and I'd see him, and he'd tell me about the movies he'd worked on. I'd get on my pony afterwards and gallop along and shoot myself falling off, because I was a lonely kid, there's nobody else to play with. And then all I ever wanted to do was ride racehorses. And I was an amateur jockey. I left school at 14 after I'd ridden my first winner when I was 14 and a half in a steeplechase, and decided I just wanted to be a jockey. A few years later, a stuntman came and used to ride exercise on our horses to keep fit. And lo and behold, a movie came along called Arabesque with Sophia Loren and Gregory Peck, and they wanted a horse. So I let them have a horse, and then they said, look, we need somebody to ride it. He's going to jump off moats and over all sorts of things, chased by helicopters. I went, sure, that's great. I'll do that. And that was 1965, 60 years ago. And I was getting 20 pounds a day, which in those days, the average wage was 14 pounds a week. So I was Mr. Money. And I thought, whoa, I could make a living of this. Because in those days, stuntmen were part-timers. They would have a second job. It wasn't such a prolific business as it is now. And I thought, this is great. I can race my horses. I can earn money doing the film business. I tried to make a career of it. But the point of the story is it's pure fate. I just happened to be there, into my horse. And, you know, once I got into the business, then I started learning other aspects of it. My wife, funnily enough, who's sitting here tonight, wonderful stunt woman, did Indiana Jones and Bond and Superman with me. She taught me the trampoline to give me awareness in the air and things like that. So it's just fate. So rambling on a bit there, but that's how I got into business.
Now, we'll go down the line from there. I know, Chris, you actually pursued this pretty ardently, this profession. You started out, you were a gymnast in college at Temple University, and tell me what happened after that.
Yeah, I was a gymnast, and I think this business is kind of, people that get into this business are very specialized now. So that's kind of your in, that's your hook. I went to college for, you know, the athlete plan of 5 years, and got out of college, and I never felt that I really reached my potential as a college athlete. So I wanted to find something to keep pursuing myself and pursuing that competitive drive that I had. Gymnasts tend to go to like Cirque du Soleil. At the time, I really didn't know any gymnasts that kind of have gone into the stunt business. I did a little stint as an aerial skier for the U.S. ski team and realized that probably wasn't going to pay the bills for the rest of my life. So I basically went back to a gymnastics camp that I trained at every summer. At the end of that summer, I packed everything up that I had and moved to California. I knew that I just had to have the mindset that I was going to be successful. And being a 6-foot-tall gymnast was something that was not normal. And so that was my hook. You have to have that hook that sets you apart from everybody else. And then you can learn, like Vic said, you learn along the way and you learn all the other skill sets. So that's kind of my story. Yeah.
And Nate, you were in the NFL and the military, and how did that lead to the movies?
Yeah, well, first of all, even before that, my dad was a racehorse veterinarian, so I grew up around the track as well, which is, yeah, just being around animals like that and that level of riding and all of that. I wasn't a jockey, but I did ride a bit at a young age, and then playing sports, of course, and then serving in the military, and then back to sports after. I think all those things are pretty, physical in nature and high octane and the adrenaline and all that. And then when I was 34 and I was done with the military and football was over, I was really interested in film and television and storytelling specifically. But one of my ins, or I guess my in, was my background. And for a lot of the first few films and TV shows I worked on, I got hired because I was a veteran, or because I was an athlete. So acting, playing some, you know, some smaller roles in these things, but with an expectation that we don't need a stunt person for you, right? You know, and so that kind of developed. And then when I, you know, had the opportunity to get more behind the camera and make some of my own stuff with a modest budget, you know, once again, it's like, okay, well, if I don't have to pay, you know, one of the lead actors and the director and the producer and, you know, somebody to do the stunts, then maybe I can make this movie happen on this budget. So it just sort of organically fell in like that. But I've never done, you know, some of the spectacular stunts that these men and women have done. So I have great respect for that. And I will say quickly, too, that I think there is such a connection, the team, you know, and like in the military, it's all about the team. It's all about the man and woman on your left and right, keeping them safe, but doing things that are high risk. And that's what these people exemplify, I think, in the film industry more than any other job. They have that sort of military camaraderie aspect, and I've got your back, and let's make this amazing. Let's make it spectacular, but let's do it, you know, in a way that we're all going to walk away from it.
Now, Shane, I think the question to how you got in the industry is kind of answered in your bio. You were apparently conceived on the set of a movie.
Yeah, I won't go into too much detail, but thank you all for coming. This is really awesome. RJ, the Round Top Gang, this has been really cool, so I'm grateful to be here. Unlucky, I guess, to have to follow these guys, but I guess my villain origin story is a lot less interesting, or maybe more, depending how you look at it. But my dad was a stuntman, and so I grew up performing. You know, I worked for all his friends. I was just an athletic kid, played every sport, and he kind of just farmed me out to his friends who were stunt coordinators. And there wasn't much more to it than that, but over time, I you know, looking back, I guess we kind of bred for it. You know, we grew up with air rams in the backyard, which are, you know, in hindsight, these barbaric machines that are absolutely lethal, but we used them like trampolines in the backyard. My dad would bail me out of school to go skydiving at the one place in the country where it was sort of legal to skydive as a minor. And I was working all the way through, and then at a certain point, I fell in love not just with action, but with the design aspect and the filmmaking aspect. You know, from making little G.I. Joe crime scenes in the backyard and making movies out of it, to deciding, you know, I played every sport. My brother played sports, and I saw him go through the NCAA system, and, you know, he was All-American decathlete, and it was basically like his full-time job in college. And so I decided I didn't want to go to college for sports. I wanted to go to college for film, because that's what I wanted to do. So ended up going to film school, and got out of film school and was so hot on all I want to do is direct and produce movies. I'll direct and, you know, I'll do commercials or whatever to kind of get there. And about that time, this movie came out called John Wick, and just standing on the shoulders of these guys, you know, those were stunt coordinators who directed that movie, and that kind of opened the door to, you know, people like us, not just being fall guys, but being filmmakers. So I still kind of had that, I guess, competitive itch to perform and want to be the guy. And so I've just pushed heavily the last, you know, 10, 15 years on just focusing on performing, on action design. And I think that kind of, you know, film school process, you know, I was definitely an atypical film school kid because I was still performing stunts at the same time, which has since made me, I guess, an atypical stunt coordinator. But really just kind of allowed me to kind of move through the process because I speak the whole language and I like doing all of it. But it's really just been built upon, you know, guys like Vic and Chris who have opened our industry from just being guys who show up to jump through windows to now, like, you know, we have immense creative control over entire sequences. And we can be really just influential in how a whole film was made. That was a long way about saying my dad was a stuntman.
Well, cool. Well, Crystal, I know you do a lot of stuff with motorcycles, and I remember, you know, 10, 20 years ago, it used to always be Donna Evans and her sister Debbie. Whenever, you know, any woman, actually did a motorcycle stunt, it was them. Is it you now, and how did you get into it?
You know, I don't know if I'll claim that, but I'm glad to follow in those wonderful women's footsteps. And my intro into this actually didn't come from a background in motorsports. I'm a farm kid. I was raised in the woods. I went to college for bovine embryology, and then I ran off and was a 4-H team leader for a 4-H camp in Florida. Made myself kind of available at a drag strip, decided to race my motorcycle there. Went from that into freestyle motorcycle stunt riding. Made friends with some drifters. Got into drifting cars, the good kind, not the bad kind. I traded a buddy of mine. I was like, I've got a 240. I'll teach you how to wheelie if you teach me how to drift, and we're still friends today. And then I got a phone call about a movie, and that was Fast Five. That was like 2009, 2010. And I was just recovering from a surgery, and I had 2 weeks left before the doctor gave me the thumbs up. And they were like, yeah, we want you to come to a movie. And I was like, what? I didn't even know that this was an opportunity for a career. They needed a girl to do some stuff, and I gladly obliged. Since then, I realized that it was kind of where two crossroads in my life met, and a wonderful opportunity to make a career. So I'm very thankful for all the farm experiences. Even today, we have a place, and all the skills that I learned there in combination and continuance with motorcycles and cars, big trucks, equipment, that allow my lifestyle to actually really be the thing that makes my career. It's not something that's like, dang, you know, I got called to drive that tractor and I've just never done it. It's like, oh yeah, we got 2 of those at the house, you know. But to answer your question about Miss Donna and Miss Debbie, I call Miss Debbie all the time. She's a wonderful human, so is her sister Miss Donna, and I hope that one day I can put both of those shoes on and fill them all the way.
And Noelle? Oh, sorry.
I am abundant in microphones at this time. Hello. I grew up in Utah as a Utah kid. The second I found a camera in my mom's closet, of course, many of you all remember the ones would flip out like this. I have 3 brothers and a sister, and as soon as I found that thing, it was all over. Movies, 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 all day long. I would have ketchup as blood, and a shark bit their arm, and oh no, or get in the tree, okay, now fall out. Okay, and now there's a boat, and it's sinking. Like, it was just constant theatrics the day that I popped out, 100%. Whether that was, you know, making music or writing stories or sewing clothing or whatever it was, I've just loved storytelling from the second I showed up on this earth, if you will. I thought I was going to be a doctor. I went to school for emergency medicine. I got a bachelor's degree in that, and that was my whole path. I worked in the ER as an EMT. I worked in neurosurgery. I flew on the helicopters. And then I got to a point that I got so burnt out in that arena that I was like, dude, I can't do this. I was working in the IMSU and pediatric hospitals, and it just became, I was very good at my job, but I would go home and just like stare at the ceiling. I was so tapped out. So when that chapter came to a close, I was so upset because I was like, oh my God, that was my heart. And then I ended up moving to Hawaii, living in a hostel, doing trade work, sharing a bunk room with 8 other women from the ages of 18 to 60. And somewhere along the way, I found out stunts was a real thing. And I was like, come to say what? I've been doing that for free my whole life. Like, I grew up skateboarding, snowboarding, rock climbing, you know, off-roading cars in Utah, just being a kid out there. Found out that was real. I was like, okay, well, quite obviously that's what I'm going to do. I was around 22, 23 at the time. Packed up everything, sold everything, drove out to LA with $700 in my pocket, because at the time that was so much money. I did everything I could to afford training from there, babysitting, bartending, whatever, to learn how to do everything. And funny enough, this man right here, Tom, gave me my very first 1X on a pilot, and RJ was my very first tactical advisor. And Tom trusted me because I came from an EMS background and gave me a shot. And actually, yeah, and now here we are.
Oh, good. Well, that's a good segue to Tom.
Tom.
And sorry for the alphabet, Tom, and you've been at the end of it. But tell us how, you're from Australia originally, correct?
That's correct. Originally born on a cattle station out back Australia, and I grew up and I went to college in Australia on a rodeo scholarship, and I rodeoed as a kid, and I won a title. And then when I was 20 years old, my mom had connections with what was then Rhodesia back in the day, now Zimbabwe, and I was like, I'm going back to Africa. So I jumped on a plane. I actually ended up in Kenya in East Africa. And but when I went to boarding school in college, I also played polo. So I was very lucky. I played bowler for the president in Kenya, and there was a movie in town, TV series actually, and the man who was responsible for giving his protege, Simon Crane, that job was a man called Vic Armstrong. It was young Indiana Jones. And I had a call from a good friend of mine called Tristan, said, "We need some horses, Tom." And I was like, "I've got a bunch." So I took him down there, and they were a little rough around the edges, and there was a gentleman called Geordie Casares, who Vic mentored, and Simon Crane. And I thought, this is good beer money, and I was having fun and being stupid, and they said, "Would you like to have a job?" And I said, "Thank you," and that's where I started. And next thing you know, Simon has me on the earlier films I did, Braveheart, and then I don't think I've done another horse movie for a long time. I was swimming in the cold water of Baja, California after that in Titanic, which was a little bit of a shock for a bush boy. And that's how I started. So I think being a ranch kid or cattle station in our language, and having that broad experience of flying airplanes and helicopters and driving heavy vehicles and stuff like that, and then doing a few silly things in Africa and had a place out there till '98 till we lost it. And that gave me a really good basis for what we do now, and the great people I met through and who mentored me to get me to a point where I could then go out and stand on my own 2 feet, kind of speak, was amazing. And I've had an amazing experience in this industry, and I have an amazing career so far. Hopefully it hasn't ended yet. And people like Charles Roven, Simon Crane, and Vic himself, and a man who impacted me a lot was Chris Nolan. And I got to work with him a lot, and before I've moved on and done other stuff myself now, and gave me the opportunities that being in the right place at the right time, and just saying, "Yes, sir," and let's go to work.
Cool. And you bringing up Chris Nolan actually gives me a perfect segue to my next question, more of a general question I want to throw to the panel. Christopher Nolan is someone who famously insists on everything real, almost no CGI, and with stunts in the past 20 or 30 years, I think, if not a battle, there's been a real kind of push-pull with visual effects. It makes you able to do things a lot more safely. You can erase wires, so you can use bigger wires. You can composite shots, so that fire explosion doesn't have to be in the same shot. But it also makes things look a lot less real. And I think I was listening to you talk about doing the role in Fall Guy, and it not only has to be real, it has to actually look dangerous. You said, to give a feel of danger or something. Like, if I reference, say, there's a famous thing for Bond fans, there was a stunt in Man with the Golden Gun where they do a 360 twirl with a car, and it was not only ruined by the fact that they used a slide whistle over it, it just looked too perfect. And so how is it working with visual effects in that battle to keep it real and organic so people can feel it and not just think they're watching a cartoon? Is that a constant push-me-pull-you thing?
I think nowadays, I think it's a blend, right? I think visual effects have gotten really, really good. And I think when the ultimate stunt design is going to be something that incorporates all of those aspects. How are we using visual effects to make it look real? How are we going to make it integrated together? Yes, doing things practical is the ultimate goal, and sometimes that's the mandate. But we're really smart, and we've done a lot of things, and there's some ways to do it, and some ways that involve visual effects. And if we can kind of find that good blend, I wouldn't say it's a fight. Right. It depends on what you get. There's some visual effects guys that want to do everything themselves, and then there's some guys that want us to do it all. And then there's the guys that really work together, and how can we both benefit each other? Because again, it's a team, right? It's not the visual effects department's going to look great, the stunt department's going to look great. It's like, how does the whole movie look great? And that just comes from all working together, so.
Yeah, I think it's it's a blend. There's a trade-off in all jobs, and I always look as visual effects as I'll get out of jail free card. Whenever I get a script, I break it down as if I'm going to do everything practically, and you narrow it down until you get to the aerial. We can't physically do this. You can't physically do that. And then you start thinking about what visual effects you could put in it to a minimum amount. And I have this love-hate relationship with visual effects. I was sort of equate it to morphine. Morphine, in the right dose for the right ailment, is an absolute godsend. Used and abused is a killer. And I feel the same way with visual effects. Used in the right way, it's terrific. You know, I go back to the old days, both Wendy and myself, I think we worked through the halcyon days of modern filmmaking from the 70s, 80s, you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark, etc., through to the 2000s. You know, Raiders was a great blend of reality, visual effects, and it just melded itself in so well. And then you go to Superman. I remember I had to fly out of, I was doubling Chris Reeves, fly out of the swimming pool and have the kryptonite taken off my neck and go through the ceiling. In those days, they couldn't shoot at the ceiling because the wires are going through it and they didn't have the ability to clean it all up. So we went back to the silent movie days, took the floor out of the studio, there's a pit there, built the ceiling on the floor. Everything was put upside down. I went up into the perms, 2 stuntmen holding a leg each, another guy with fish wire holding my cape up so it was hanging over my neck. I get in the Superman pose and flew down through the ceiling into the floor. They turned it around and that's how I flew out. But I grew up with that mentality of there's a way around everything. But then, as I say, when you get out of jail free card, there's a wonderful thing called visual effects, and it just enhances it. And as Chris said, it's all about the end product. It's making that movie, whether it's Harrison Ford, Chris Reeves, or Brad Pitt. When people come out of the audience, they want to believe those people did what you saw on screen, and they did it for real. And we're illusionists, and that's what we try and do.
Do you have any comments, Tom, or anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's a creative decision and it's blended, and obviously these days we have a lot of input from our producers, directors and the studio. A lot of financial decisions are made on our sequences these days. Obviously, like Vic, always try to break it down into a practical elements, etc. And you know, honestly, I think there's stuff I've done that it contained a big visual effects aspect that I would today again fight against doing. But for example, the aerial sequence in Dark Knight Rises, we did that practical, even to a point we had a buck at 6,500 feet off the ground and guys abseiling into it and jumping out. If I was given that opportunity again, I'd probably do a lot of that digital, because the danger, the element of danger of 4 people out the back of a C-130 aircraft at 120 knots, I don't think I'd want to have the same heart attack that I had then. And going back a little bit, for me, the stress of performing, I didn't find it a stress because the rehearsal period I was given by the people I worked for at the time, and the danger element is really, that incident curve is taken right down. But I don't know about everyone else, but myself coordinating, and I'm more nervous of someone else's impaired danger and what may or may not happen to them. So I'm very much a safety officer. I think a lot of these days trying to keep people healthy and well and safe and let them go home at the end of the day, but creatively still do it. So short answer is, some things I would rely more on visual effects now, and other things that I still think creatively looks so much better when we creatively style it so it can be done physically in camera.
And something that was interesting to me, it's not going to be interesting to them. Speaking of technology, I talked to people about, not high falls, but falls. Like, you guys still use cardboard boxes? Like, yeah, we still use cardboard boxes, as opposed to an airbag or just, pads or something. Like, people still like doing that, right?
It's interesting because actually cardboard boxes are great. It goes back to the old days. You can tuck a cardboard box into a little corner over there. He's coming off that deck and landing in the alleyway. You get an airbag, you can't fit it in there. There's say trade-offs in every department. It's just pure experience, knowing how to make that rig as well. You know what you're doing making a cardboard box rig. I remember falling through a skylight. Me and another guy were wrestling. We go through the skylight 20 feet onto the rig. And it was in the early days. We're stupid and we're learning, and the only way you're going to learn is through hard knocks. And we put a carpet over it because you make the boxes. We just made regular boxes, stacked them up. 2-foot square cardboard boxes, 2-ply, fairly soft, so you think, until you hit them. And we put a carpet over the top, tied a cord around it so the carpet didn't sort of go down with us when we hit it. We jumped off, and we both hit it, we went in about an inch. And it's only then you learn to, you offset your boxes, you probably pre-crush them a little bit, don't cover them too tight, there's all the other nuances. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with cardboard boxes in the world. If it does the job, that's what we do.
Yeah, and one benefit to cardboard boxes is that we have an airbag, right? So an airbag, we've all seen that. But one thing about an airbag is if you hit the edge of an airbag, it's not good. So an edge of an airbag, you're going to roll right off to the ground. So, you know, you want to hit an airbag dead center. You want to get an airbag that's big enough to give you a lot of leeway. But boxes are one of those things that you can hit the edge of boxes if you set them up correctly, and it will still kind of slow your fall down and do what it's supposed to. So that's another case where sometimes boxes are a great use. And like Vic said, putting into places, you know, airbags only come in certain sizes, and so cardboard boxes can be made into anything. And kind of the general rule of thumb is like one 2 foot by 2 foot box is good for 10 feet. So pretty much every 10
Exactly.
feet you can jump in the, you know, just keep going that level, and that's kind of like the equation.
You know, our business is it's not about the falling, it's the stopping.
Yeah.
Tom?
Anybody can fall, it's the last 2 or 3 feet, they're the hard bits.
I just want to add to Chris's on that. I'm by no means a high fall specialist, but I did one for Simon Crane, and I chose to go boxes because of the uneven entry into it. But I'd like to mention there's a gentleman that Vic used a lot back in the day. His name was Gabor Pirog, and back in the early 1990s, he's Hungarian. He did 200 feet into cardboard boxes, and for that stunt alone, he got the honor of being given a second-hand 190 Mercedes by the Hungarian government. And I don't think it's ever been beaten. He was an amazing aerial stuntman into boxes, and it was Gabor Pirog, and it was just incredible.
Yeah, Gabor 00, we used to call him. He started work for me on Total Recall, the Schwarzenegger Total Recall. And he showed us his show reel, and I was just blown away. He does a high fall off a bridge into a moving truck that the bed of the truck has got cardboard boxes in. So you imagine trying to time that out. Oh, it's a madman, but a wonderful, wonderful guy. Arnold Schwarzenegger, just a great tribute to him for his, I think it was his 60th or 70th birthday, and Arnold gave him a wonderful tribute. But you know, you meet these characters in the business, and they're not daredevils. They're just people that want to prove something to themselves, or they're just people you wouldn't meet in any other walk of life. And we're all very, very privileged to spend our life amongst these people. You know, people say, "What do you do for work?" I say, "I play cowboys and Indians every day. That's all I do." It's a game. It's wonderful, and I just work with a wonderful crew of people. It's such fun, and everybody's an oddball. They all come from different walks of life. It's such fun.
And Vic, if I can add to that, if anyone ever goes to Hungary on the way to a studio called Quarter Studios, there's 2 big bridges, arches. That's what this gentleman jumped off. And the thing that Vic did not say is they called action on the truck. He could not see the truck coming around the corner underneath, so he counted in his head and just jumped. And that was how Gabor was. Incredible, like, I don't know. It's not something I would have done personally, but he could not see the truck coming. In those days, didn't know if the engine has even started, and he landed right on the boxes, right on the edge corner of that truck. Nearly missed it.
Just for a point of clarity, Gabor retired, correct?
I hope so,
Yes.
but I don't think so.
Right.
Yes, he's retired now.
Retired. Okay.
Yeah.
I want a slightly controversial question. I know you guys work a lot these days with, like you have with David Leitch, who's someone who came from a stunt background. Not every director is that way. And if you listen to the gossip and the history, a lot of directors are screamers. And I've even talked to like a stunt legend who worked with a very famous director, who early in his career got some people killed. And later after I talked to that guy, got some people with some injuries they will never recover from. And he would say, yeah, it's only because of me, people didn't get killed on this film. You have screamers like, you got to get it now before the light goes down. And is that still a problem these days at all, fighting these people to like say, no, we're not going to do that? You're the, like, kind of the where the buck stops and maintaining safety and stuff like that?
It's always a tap dance. Our business is 75% politics as well. You're dealing with all sorts of different egos, money, all sorts of issues, time, schedules, all sorts of things, and people's personalities. And we have to, stunt coordinators, action unit directors, designers, we have to deliver what that director would presumably be able to deliver if he was doing it himself. But he's not. We're sent in there as his surrogates to do it for him. And so you get a tap dance between the politics, reality, safety, and everything else. And I remember years and years ago, I was doing a picture in Greece called Escape to Athena, really a star-studded movie. And George Cosmatos, who ended up being a great old friend of mine, he did Capricorn 1 and such like that, and the Tombstone. Anyway, he said, when I first met him, he wanted this opening sequence, part of the opening sequence is Greek resistance fighter being chased by these German soldiers along the side of the Corinth Canal. The Corinth Canal is a huge, huge canal cut through the end of Greece, where the big liners go through. They're saving a 1,000-mile round trip round the tip. But it's about 350 feet high. It's huge. Anyway, he said, wanted this guy running along there, and then there's a railway bridge over the top. Get on the railway bridge, jump off into the canal, and escape the Germans. And I said, well, George, you can't do that. You can't jump 350 feet. Oh, of course you can. I said, look, I could build a platform under, and there's always a way to do it. You could build a platform 40 foot down under this bridge sticking out. You could jump 40 feet. We could drop him on a descender, and then we could let him free fall 100 feet from a T-bone or anything like that. No, I've seen that a million times. I want to say, he's got to jump. And I was arguing backwards and forwards, trying to be politically polite. Anyway, we'd reached the stone wall, and then 2 o'clock one morning, my phone rang and said, Vic, I know how we could do it. I know how he could do it safely. I said, oh, George, okay, what, how? He could steal a German helmet. Oh, George, yeah, I'd protect his head. I said, he'd have no head when he hit the water, my God. You know, what are you talking about? I put the phone down. We went to Greece, we shot the movie, and towards the end of the movie, he said, Vic, we're going to go up to Athens at the weekend, want to look at some locations. I went, oh, great, lovely, nice helicopter trip up to Athens. We get there, we're walking around, and suddenly I realize I'm looking at the Corinth Canal. I thought, uh-oh, little red lights going off here. And he said, you sure you can't do this, Vic? I said, George, I've told you, you cannot jump that height, free fall into the canal. We have a boat. You could put the boxes on a liner. I said, George, you don't just drive them up and down like a tug. They weigh millions of tons. No, you can't do it. And I was getting angry with him. And I said, you could probably go to the lunatic asylum and hire somebody and tell them to jump off. But then they'd do you for manslaughter. And I just stormed off. I was so angry. I sat down in this cafe and I ordered coffee. Turkish coffee, and I made the mistake of stirring it. It takes 20 minutes for the grains to slow down. So I'm sitting there, and this big old bear sits next to me. I look, it's George, he's got a cigarette in each hand. He's a very nervous character. And all he did, he looked at me and said, I wouldn't, you know. I said, you wouldn't what? He said, ask the cops. They wouldn't do me for manslaughter. I went, oh, my God. So that's the sort of politics you have to deal with in this business. It's not cut and dried, you know.
Well, speaking of politics, and it's unlike other things, this, as you point out, can get people killed. One of the ongoing controversies in the stunt world, I mean, years ago, we had the issue with paint downs, which is when they would, paint down a person, like, say, a white stuntman to be black. And still, there's controversy there. Sometimes, a black stuntman, has to be a different shade, and even guys who fought to have that stopped will get crap from people for, listen, I'm the one who solved this problem, but they have to change the shade of my skin. But what I think we have more ongoing now is perhaps the problem of wigging, which is also a controversy in the stunt community, where they have a man stand in for a woman, as we hand the microphone over to Crystal. And this has been a big problem, particularly actually with motorcycle stunts, I think. It has in the past. Have you had to, deal with that? Go ahead, Crystal.
Oh man, I got a couple things to say about this. No, the first thing actually what I want to talk about, and then I'll get back to the second. We have been introduced in the last 10 to 15 years to a lot of diversity in our business, and I think it's great for people to put whoever they want to in whatever position or character they want to. However, I will stand adamantly until the day I no longer work in this business to say that it should be the right person with the right skill set for the job. There's no sense in putting people, just because of their skin tone, hair color, whatever, in harm's way when they are not equipped to perform the task at hand. Just clear that up.
Here, here.
And people have gotten killed. I can't go into details, but with the motorcycle stunt.
Yeah, there was an unfortunate situation in Canada. Bless her. And then for the Wigan thing, you know, I've only experienced that one time in my business, like in my career, and it was a unique situation. And I think there was a little bit of ego involved in that decision, a little bit of competition, a little bit of fear. But it's interesting to see, you know, that my path in this business is, you know, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm kind of the redneck. And so I came into the business and they were just like, who is this Southern thing? And she's not one of us. That's how I felt anyways. And so having to prove myself, and the only way I knew to do that is to look at the, you know, professionals that have come before me and the standard in which they've set and being just perfect all the time. So I devoted my time and efforts and financial ability towards living the lifestyle, continuing to put into it, and be the best that I can. So I feel like in trying to be that person and still having to compete with the political side of it, and then dudes as well, it has happened, but I will speak for people that are on this committee interview process with us. Chris O'Hara, this is a wonderful story. So typically, all the big stuff go to boys. That's just the way it is. They typically have more experience. We have to work really hard, which I think that I value experience and people actually having real experience doing it and getting hired for the job, right? I just said that. Chris gave me an opportunity a couple years ago. I did a big pipe ramp with the two other guys that are extremely established and great drivers in our business, but I got to do the big one.
Tell them what a pipe ramp is.
So it is a metal structure that is a long ramp that has a kicker at the end, and you drive at a set speed, and this, I think it was like 45, so up it, and then you try to load that pipe, either driver's side or passenger side, so it flips this way or that way, and then you go, whee, bang. But the point of this is that Chris, and the professional that he is, and also wanting to see progress in us, and people that have put in the work and the time and shown the real effort in pursuing what a stunt person is, I think, gave me this opportunity to do this really big thing with the cool kids. And I got to show, you know, kind of some of my salt. And for that, I'll always be grateful.
But it's not a male or female thing, right? So she's a great driver. She's known in the business as being a driver. So just because she's a female doesn't mean can't do the job. And sometimes they don't get those opportunities. And so when that opportunity presented it was like, Crystal's a great driver, and I have all the confidence. And that's why it is really hard though in this business, because you hire people and hopefully they do a good job to make you look good, to make the production look good. And that's why this business is so very tight-knit, because everybody's trying to make sure that they keep everything protected, so that they don't, you know, if they hire somebody that does a bad job, it doesn't only reflect on that person, also reflects on me. So that means that I'm not doing my job. And so, you know, Crystal was the right person for the job, and that was it at the time, and she did awesome. And then she got another one right after that. She did a Sidewinder after that. And
Yeah, Chris
so.
was like, we're gonna hit this van at 60. I was like, yes, sir, got it, we're going.
Well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just want to add this one thing. So my idea is that if I keep being the best that I can be and try to be as perfect, whatever that is, as I can, that these opportunities will come and that we can prove, despite girl, boy, whatever, that we are the right person for the job.
Well, let me tie something in that's also a trend in the industry. We're shooting more overseas for a lot of reasons, mainly tax credits and union rates in the United States. And Shane, you've done a lot of stuff over there. You did Extraction, where you did a spectacular helicopter train thing.
Yeah.
Tell us what it was like to shoot. Were you shooting in Hungary?
Extraction we did in the Czech Republic.
Czech
Prague
Republic,
mostly.
sorry.
Yeah.
And working in, say, Central or Eastern Europe, doing huge stunt sequences, are there advantages, disadvantages, and you know, what did you have to do to pull that off?
I mean, I think all of us, you know, the dream, talking back to your visual effects question, is like, how do you take something that seems impossible on the page and find find like a methodical, safe way to do it. And that's kind of how I looked at the helicopter train thing. Seems impossible to land a helicopter on a moving train and have guys climb out, but if you just start breaking it down, I just took it as like, what's the simplest version of this? And that's basically a helicopter landing on the ground and people climbing out. And so we just marked out like the size of what the top of that thing, that train car was, and then went from there to, okay, now let's do it, guys landing on top of the truck, but nobody's moving, the truck's not moving. And then let's do it without people, with the truck moving, get the helicopter moving. We rented an airport tarmac, so we'd get up to speed. And we just slowly built up speed until you go step by step by step over several days to the point where, every step is choreographed and every guy in the helicopter knows exactly where they're meant to be every second. And you build up to a helicopter coming in, landing a skid on a truck that's going 50 miles an hour, and the guy's climbing out. Doing it in Hungary versus doing it in the U.S., the producer called me. After we did that movie, we did another one recently in Budapest, and he's like, hey, we're looking at shooting in either Budapest or Australia, but I don't think Australia is going to let us do the kind of stuff we want to do, and Budapest doesn't give a shit. So we ended up in Budapest, and there's something to be said for that. They want us to come, they want us to do the work. They have a lot of skilled labor. It's got increasingly harder to bring more of your own team over there because we've taught so many of them. But ultimately, like Crystal said, you always use the best guy or girl for the job. And if they're not in Hungary, then it doesn't matter if they're from the Yukon. If they can do the job, that's the guy who's going to do it. So obviously, when you're shooting there, you try to prioritize, fiscally using people that are there. But most of the time, you bring in, a good handful of people you trust.
Well, I don't think you can have a film panel in 2025 without at least bringing up AI. They've been using what we used to call synthespians for a long time. The opening of a very beautiful stunt-heavy movie that Vic did, Die Another Day, was prefaced by a very bad, windsurfing sequence? Yes, yeah, he's going to cry. But so much other stuff in there, but that's what a lot of people unfortunately talked about. Spider-Man movies have a lot of that. Where do you see that stuff going forward, affecting or not affecting what you guys do, just that type of technology?
I don't want to be pessimistic about it, but at some point, it's gotten to the point, the CG, where sometimes I can't tell, where the digital takeover was, and I stare at the stuff all day long, and we all design it. At a certain point, there's not going to be a reason to hit a guy with a car. There already is very few reasons. It has to be a very specific thing to do certain stunts where people can get hurt. And I think at a certain point, if the computer can do it better and I don't have to ask my friend to stand in front of a car, then we're not going to. What that says for us, I don't know. I talked with Vic. He kind of lived through the best of it, the 90s, early 2000s, where everything had to be real. And then the pendulum kind of swung the other way. And, the last 15 years, everything's done in a computer, but now it seems to be kind of swinging back. So I think there's always an appetite for, handmade food, the same way, once in a while you want to eat a McDonald's cheeseburger, but you can't eat that every day. You gotta, once in a while you want to go to a nice restaurant and have somebody make you real food. And I think that's always my analogy for, real action versus whatever the computer's making.
And I just want to add to that, something that I think is so important. One of the most important pieces of being a human being is storytelling. That's how we communicate with each other, connect with each other, reflect historically and project in the future. Being a storyteller is so innately human and so primal. And if we're having AI, robots, whatever, tell our stories completely, that deletes such a huge part of who we are as human beings. So yes, that I fully believe the pendulum will swing so far one way, but I also believe that it will swing so far the other way too, because if we're storytellers, we're filmmakers, we're artists through and through, we're not gonna, if AI gets so real, cool, that's fine. Guess what I'm gonna do? Still make movies with my friends. And there's so many of us that are going to keep doing this. We're not gonna stop, So that's my thought on that.
I do think it's scary, actually, because it's such a new thing, you don't know where it's going to end up. I've just been doing The Rings of Power, and, with very sort of a lot of visual effects stuff on it. And my video assist guy, he's playing around, and he downloaded some little app on his iPhone. I think Grok it was called. And he's, just for a joke, he sent me a picture of me standing on the set directing, and then I suddenly tear my jacket open and I turn into Superman and fly off into space. And he did it in 5 minutes on the set. So, you know, the more sophisticated that becomes, that you can do it. And our business is driven by finance, of course. It's, you know, it's artistic, we know, but they're going to make money out of it. If it's cheaper to do stunts or action, or what everybody's worried about is even the actors. You know, they can now photograph you, and they can have you quote a soliloquy from Macbeth if they want, just from a photograph of you and taking a sample of your voice. It's very, very scary, but hopefully it will be captured. But it does worry me for the future, I must say. My kids, they're all in the business, and it is worrying. Yeah, it's such a it's a magic that we don't understand even. It's untold.
I personally think that it comes down to the audience, you know, because the audience they want to connect to something real. I think that's what a lot of young people are craving today. They are growing up with all this, you know, digital and AI and all this. There is like a need for that. I saw somebody the other day talking about, you know, we're going to get to this point where you literally cannot see. The line will no longer be this blurred line where you can kind of tell what's AI and what's not. You just won't be able to tell anymore. And at that point, maybe everybody's going to put down their cell phones because they're like, I don't even know what's real and fake, so what's the point? And we got to get back to this. So like this has to maintain, I think, for not just for the survival of the industry, but for art and for creativity and for like minds to develop and people to actually be human. We need humans doing these things.
Well, actually, when we talk about what's real, real on screen, Vic has done a lot of that. And that's why today he's going to be receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award from Round Top Film Festival. And what we're going to do now is we're going to show you a reel of his work, and you'll be shocked at, you know, how much of it you've seen and loved already. Fantastic. And here is your Maverick Stunt Award, or lifetime. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. This is fantastic. I don't even know who that guy was up there. It seems it's just all gone by in a blur. 60 years of, as I said earlier, playing cowboys and Indians. But thank you. Yeah. This is beautiful. I'll take that. Thank you so much. And as was mentioned earlier, thank you to the film festival here. It's just such a special thing. Rob Shannon and all the people that supported him and the effort they put into it. And it is the first one where we're really seriously talking about Oscars for the work that all these people have done over the years and the future. I won't get one, but the future, our kids will. And it's such a wonderful place to come here. Round Top is, there's a certain karma when you come into the place. Everybody's smiling, all the volunteers are so helpful, and to get this, I really, really, really treasure it. Thank you so, so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So before we go, I want to just focus on Vic for a second, ask you a few questions. As he's admired, that's going to be engraved later, I believe. I'm looking at the gold. Yeah, look at the gold. And so you mentioned how you got into doing a horse stunt for Gregory Peck on Arabesque. How did it go after that? How did you continue to do that? Was the next thing Bond? You only live twice?
That was the second year. As I say, I started as a horse rider. I could always drive. My mum taught me to drive on the gallops when I was 7 or 8 years old, so I could change gears and do the works. And at the time I came into the business, there were a lot of horse operas, as we used to call them in those days. Mary Queen of Scots, Macbeth, Ivanhoe, Robin Hood, all those sort of movies were out. So I would get employed. As Chris was saying, you have one of your expertise. My expertise, his was gymnast, mine was horse riding. I'd get pulled in as a horse rider. But growing up amongst animals and things, you learn a sense of responsibility and of being able to coordinate and plan things. As a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, I was running the stables for my dad. He was away with the British show jumping team traveling the world, so it was my responsibility. So I had these certain skills, but I was smart enough to know when I got on the movie, I'd meet with the stunt guys and the sword masters we used to have in those days. I learned a sword fight. I learned a trampoline. I learned about boxes, I learned about high falls, and I was very, very lucky. There weren't a huge amount of stunt people in those days. So I was the young face, believe it or not. I was the young one in those days. There's probably 50, 60 stunt people, most of them ex-servicemen from the war. Wendy's father was responsible for the stunts with Bob Simmons on Dr. No and the early Bonds, which I didn't know at the time. So 65, I did Arabesque. I then got another movie with Gregory Peck again in Switzerland, which went bankrupt after about 7 weeks, but I got paid out for 9 weeks, which was incredible. I bought my first horse truck, and I was running horse transport at the same time to make ends meet. And then I went to Pinewood Studios. A guy that I got the job in Switzerland from, he didn't get the audition, I did, I got it, but we stayed pals. He ended up being godfather to my son. He said, he was working on 2001, I think it was, or something. He said, I've got a contract at Pinewood. They're making a Bond film called You Only Live Twice, and they want ninjas. So I said, oh, cool, how do they? He said, take my contract. So I went up there, and coincidentally enough, I met Wendy's father, who was the assistant stunt coordinator on it. And they built this huge volcano. It was bigger than St. Paul's Cathedral.
Ken Adams said, cost $1 million, and it was the biggest set of all time.
Absolutely, Ken Adams did it. It was unbelievable. And I walked in there, and there's this, going into a cathedral, the big roof slid open. You saw some of it there. Helicopter could come in and land on a platform. There's a monorail going around it. Anyway, so I met her father, not knowing he was going to be my future father-in-law, and he said, yeah, we want guys to slide down ropes 125 feet from that rooftop. Could you do that? I went, yeah, of course I could. Yeah. I walked out thinking, no way, Jose. Anyway, I got the job, £65 a week, which is just over $100 a week. And I got called up there, but it got me the networking with all the other stuntmen in England. So I met all these top guys, Joe Powell, Ken Buckle, George Leach, Bob Simmons. And I watched and I learned from these guys. And I learned how to come down the rope. It was 1-inch hemp rope we had, 125 feet. You had to crawl out to your position, which the roof would be about here, and you'd have your feet on the stage. So you're crouched down, crawling along these girders, no safety wires or anything, over this empty space. Get to your rope, and we'd have a foot-long piece of hose pipe, rubber hose pipe, 1/8 of an inch thick, split down, and you put that around the rope, wrap your legs around it, and phew, down you go. So I learned very quickly that if you try and brake on the way down, your brakes, like a car, your brakes get hot and it doesn't work so well at the bottom. I found it better to go fast at the beginning, so I'd take talcum powder with me, put it in the hose pipe. Plus, my power to weight ratio was good because I was racing horses at the time, so I was very strong and fit. And I'd go all the way down to about 100 feet and then start putting the brakes on. Smoke would come out the top of this thing, and you hit the ground, and then you jump off and run around and kill another few people. So that's a little thing I learned on the way, but I networked, met people, and it just snowballed. And as I say, I'm a great believer in fate. And I learned to sword fence, I learned, did car jobs, and you just try and get people's confidence. And I'd go for auditions, and as I was the only young guy, the actor could be 4'6" and weighed 200 pounds. He'd still look at me and say, I think the young man on the end's a perfect double for me. So I got a lot of work in that way.
You mentioned your father-in-law, George Leach. And, well, first of all, from what I read, you didn't meet your wife, Wendy, until Superman, when she was doubling for Margot Kidder as Lois Lane, and you were Superman?
That's correct. I was stunt coordinator in Chris Reeves' double, and we trained him and did everything. I pulled Wendy in to double Margot Kidder, and, the rest is history. But as I say to everybody, she was a bit disappointed afterwards because I stopped wearing my underpants on the outside of my clothes.
And it's also interesting, if you look at like stunt credits, I was looking at credits today to prepare for this, and I already knew this to be the case, but you see like a lot of the same names repeating. There are a lot of stunt families, the Eppers, the Gills, just more than I can remember. But you have your father-in-law, and now your children are all involved in the stunt biz as well.
Absolutely. There's a lot of talk nowadays about nepotism, and I don't consider the family involvement in this business as nepotism at all. I believe it's an apprenticeship, one of the best apprenticeships you can get in the world. We've got our 4th generation Armstrong working it. My little granddaughter, she was in Rings of Power last season. She's been in this season as well. So it's 4 generations. But those kids have traveled the world with us. Wendy and I was like King Farouk when we were like doing Rambo in Israel. I'd have 2 nannies. My mother was there. Wendy was there. 4 kids. You go out to dinner, you need 2-3 taxis at dinner, But you have to do that because we literally work around the world. I've worked in over 70, 80 countries, and we go from job to job to job. Unless the family travel with you, you're never going to see them. So, but all the time, those kids are like sponges. They're learning.
Once in a while you want to eat a McDonald's cheeseburger, but you can't eat that every day. You gotta, once in a while you want to go to a nice restaurant and have somebody make you real food. And I think that's always my analogy for, real action versus whatever the computer's making.
And I just want to add to that, something that I think is so important. One of the most important pieces of being a human being is storytelling. That's how we communicate with each other, connect with each other, reflect historically and project in the future. Being a storyteller is so innately human and so primal. And if we're having AI, robots, whatever, tell our stories completely, that deletes such a huge part of who we are as human beings. So yes, that I fully believe the pendulum will swing so far one way. But I also believe that it will swing so far the other way too, because if we're storytellers, we're filmmakers, we're artists through and through, we're not gonna, if AI gets so real, cool, that's fine. Guess what I'm gonna do? Still make movies with my friends. And there's so many of us that are going to keep doing this. We're not gonna stop, So that's my thought on that.
I do think it's scary, actually, because it's such a new thing, you don't know where it's going to end up. I've just been doing the Rings of Power, and with very a lot of visual effects stuff on it. And my video assist guy, he's playing around, and he downloaded some little app on his iPhone. I think Grok it was called. And he's just for a joke, he sent me a picture of me standing on the set directing, and then I suddenly tear my jacket open, and I turn into Superman and fly off into space. And he did it in 5 minutes on the set. So the more sophisticated that becomes, that you can do it. And our business is driven by finance, of course. It's artistic, we know, but they're going to make money out of it. if it's cheaper to do stunts or action, or what everybody's worried about is even the actors. You know, they can now photograph you and they can have you quote a soliloquy from Macbeth if they want, just from a photograph of you and taking a sample of your voice. It's very, very scary, but hopefully it will be captured, but it does worry me for the future, I must say. My kids, they're all in the business, and it is worrying, yeah. It's such a, it's a magic that we don't understand even, it's untold.
I personally think that it comes down to the audience, you know, because the audience they want to connect to something real. I think that's what a lot of young people are craving today. They are growing up with all this, you know, digital and AI and all this. There is like a need for that. I saw somebody the other day talking about, you know, we're going to get to this point where you literally cannot see. The line will no longer be this blurred line where you can kind of tell what's AI and what's not. You just won't be able to tell anymore. And at that point, maybe everybody's going to put down their cell phones because they're like, I don't even know what's real and fake, so what's the point? And we got to get back to this. So like this has to maintain, I think, for not just for the survival of the industry, but for art and for creativity and for like minds to develop and people to actually be human. We need humans doing these things.
Well, actually, when we talk about what's real, real on screen, Vic has done a lot of that. And that's why today he's going to be receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award from Round Top Film Festival. And what we're going to do now is we're going to show you a reel of his work, and you'll be shocked at, you know, how much of it you've seen and loved already. Fantastic. And here is your Maverick Stunt Award, or Lifetime. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. This is fantastic. I don't even know who that guy was up there. It seems it's just all gone by in a blur. 60 years of, as I said earlier, playing cowboys and Indians. But thank you. Yeah. This is beautiful. I'll take that. Thank you so much. And as was mentioned earlier, thank you to the film festival here. It's just such a special thing. Rob Shannon and all the people that supported him and the effort they put into it. And it is the first one where we're really seriously talking about Oscars for the work that all these people have done over the years and the future. I won't get one, but the future, our kids will. And it's such a wonderful place to come here. Round Top is, there's a certain karma when you come into the place, everybody's smiling, all the volunteers are so helpful, and to get this, I really, really, really treasure it. Thank you so, so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So before we go, I want to just focus on Vic for a second, ask you a few questions. As he's admired, that's going to be engraved later, I believe. I'm looking at the gold. Yeah, look at the gold. And so you mentioned how you got into doing a horse stunt for Gregory Peck on Arabesque. How did it go after that? How did you continue to do that? Was the next thing Bond? You only live twice?
That was the second year. As I say, I started as a horse rider. I could always drive. My mum taught me to drive on the gallops when I was 7 or 8 years old, so I could change gears and do the works. And at the time I came into the business, there were a lot of horse operas, as we used to call them in those days. Mary Queen of Scots, Macbeth, Ivanhoe, Robin Hood, all those sort of movies were out. So I would get employed. As Chris was saying, you have one of your expertise. My expertise, his was gymnast, mine was horse riding. I'd get pulled in as a horse rider. But growing up amongst animals and things, you learn a sense of responsibility and of being able to coordinate and plan things. As a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, I was running the stables for my dad. He was away with the British show jumping team traveling the world, so it's my responsibility. So I had these certain skills, but I was smart enough to know when I got on the movie, I'd meet with the stunt guys and the sword masters we used to have in those days. I learned a sword fight. I learned a trampoline. I learned about boxes, I learned about high falls, and I was very, very lucky. There weren't a huge amount of stunt people in those days. So I was the young face, believe it or not. I was the young one in those days. There's probably 50, 60 stunt people, most of them ex-servicemen from the war. Wendy's father was responsible for the stunts with Bob Simmons on Dr. No and the early Bonds, which I didn't know at the time. So 65, I did Arabesque. I then got another movie with Gregory Peck again in Switzerland, which went bankrupt after about 7 weeks, but I got paid out for 9 weeks, which was incredible. I bought my first horse truck, and I was running horse transport at the same time to make ends meet. And then I went to Pinewood Studios. A guy that I got the job in Switzerland from, he didn't get the audition I did. I got it, but we stayed pals. He ended up being godfather to my son. He said, he was working on 2001, I think it was, or something. He said, I've got a contract at Pinewood. They're making a Bond film called You Only Live Twice, and they want ninjas. So I said, oh, cool. How do they? He said, take my contract. So I went up there, and coincidentally enough, I met Wendy's father, who was the assistant stunt coordinator on it. And they built this huge volcano. It was bigger than St. Paul's Cathedral.
Ken Adams set, cost $1 million, and it was the biggest set of all time.
Absolutely, Ken Adams did it. It was unbelievable. And I walked in there, and there's this going into a cathedral. The big roof slid open. You saw some of it there. Helicopter could come in and land on a platform. There's a monorail going around it. Anyway, so I met her father, not knowing he was going to be my future father-in-law, and he said, yeah, we want guys to slide down ropes 125 feet from that rooftop. Could you do that? I went, yeah, of course I could. Yeah. I walked out thinking, no way, Jose. Anyway, I got the job, £65 a week, which is just over $100 a week. And I got called up there, but it got me the networking with all the other stuntmen in England. So I met all these top guys, Joe Powell, Ken Buckle, George Leach, Bob Simmons. And I watched and I learned from these guys. And I learned how to come down the rope. It was 1-inch hemp rope. We had 125 feet. You had to crawl out to your position, which the roof would be about here, and you'd have your feet on the stage. You're crouched down, crawling along these girders, no safety wires or anything, over this empty space. Get to your rope, and we'd have a foot-long piece of hose pipe, rubber hose pipe, 1/8 of an inch thick, split down, and you put that around the rope, wrap your legs around it, and phew, down you go. So I learned very quickly that if you try and brake on the way down, your brakes, like a car, your brakes get hot and it doesn't work so well at the bottom. I found it better to go fast at the beginning, so I'd take talcum powder with me, put it in the hose pipe. Plus, my power-to-weight ratio was good because I was racing horses at the time, so I was very strong and fit. And I'd go all the way down to about 100 feet and then start putting the brakes on. Smoke would come out the top of this thing, and you hit the ground, and then you jump off and run around and kill another few people. So that's a little thing I learned on the way, but I networked, met people, and it just snowballed. And as I say, I'm a great believer in fate. And I learned to sword fence, I learned, did car jobs, and you just try and get people's confidence. And I'd go for auditions, and as I was the only young guy, the actor could be 4'6" and weighed 200 pounds. He'd still look at me and say, I think the young man on the end's a perfect double for me. So I got a lot of work in that way.
You mentioned your father-in-law, George Leach. Well, first of all, from what I read, you didn't meet your wife, Wendy, until Superman, when she was doubling for Margot Kidder as Lois Lane, and you were Superman?
That's correct. I was stunt coordinator in Chris Reeves' double, and we trained him and did everything. I pulled Wendy in to double Margot Kidder, and the rest is history. But as I say to everybody, she was a bit disappointed afterwards because I stopped wearing my underpants on the outside of my clothes.
And it's also interesting, if you look at like stunt credits, I was looking at credits today to prepare for this, and I already knew this to be the case, but you see like a lot of the same names repeating. There are a lot of stunt families, the Eppers, the Gills, just more than I can remember. But you have your father-in-law, and now your children are all involved in the stunt biz as well.
Absolutely. There's a lot of talk nowadays about nepotism, and I don't consider the family involvement in this business as nepotism at all. I believe it's an apprenticeship, one of the best apprenticeships you can get in the world. We've got our 4th generation Armstrong working it. My little granddaughter, she was in Rings of Power last season. She's been in this season as well. So it's 4 generations. But those kids have traveled the world with us. Wendy and I was like King Farouk when we were like doing Rambo in Israel. I'd have 2 nannies. My mother was there. Wendy was there. 4 kids. You out to dinner, you need 2, 3 taxis at dinner, But you have to do that because we literally work around the world. I've worked in over 70, 80 countries, and we go from job to job to job. Unless the family travel with you, you're never going to see them. So, but all the time, those kids are like sponges. They're learning about this, they're learning about that. They sit around the table, they hear the arguments, the discussions we have about how we're rigging things, how we're going to employ people, who's good, who's not. Come home from a location, they'd all be jumping out the 2nd, 3rd floor window into the airbag when we washed it down, leaving it to dry. They thought it was great fun jumping out of there. We had a trampoline on the lawn. They have an apprenticeship, and that's why I do think the Fevers, everybody in the business, the Powells, the Armstrongs, there is a whole list of family, and that you just come into. It's a natural transition. It's a wondererful thing, and as I say, apprenticeships are not something that people do nowadays, and they're very lucky and privileged to have had an apprenticeship.
A question you could have asked to the whole panel, but I'll ask through you. I don't think a lot of people truly understand what second unit directors do, particularly as it pertains to action. So I'll ask you, and it could vary film to film, how much of that action film, are you actually directing out on your own over there while the first unit is working?
Huge amounts. I actually refuse to call it second unit now because Wendy quite rightly pointed out second unit, second rate. Psychologically, people get the wrong impression completely. Even my jacket, it's Eagle unit. I call my unit. I did Tim Burton's Wednesday last year. That was the Raven unit. And the actors and everybody have a psychologically different approach to come and work on the Raven unit than they do going down to work on the second unit. They think you're just going to do some inserts or some nonsensical, unimportant stuff. And we do whole sequences. When you look at the one I'm very proud of, the boat chase down the Thames, the script said, Bond leaves MI6 in a boat. He arrives at the Dome. They were just building the Dome at the time. They wanted to advertise that. He arrives at the Dome, and we want a hot air balloon involved. And that was it. So I was doing entrapment with Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones, and every Saturday and Sunday I'd go up there with Simon Crane, who was going to be my stunt coordinator on it, and we'd go up and down the Thames, dreaming up ideas. And we came up with a boat chase that's probably 45 minutes long. You're going to trim it down to 4 or 5 minutes. But we had these great ideas, and the whole thing about chases is keeping it original, not getting repetitive, not getting boring. So I knew I had to show the important parts of London, Tower Bridge, House of Parliament. Then I wanted to get off the Thames, because it's a tough place to shoot with the traffic on it. And that's how that whole thing evolved. But I wrote the whole thing, directed the thing, the one on the ice, the Bond through Saigon on the motorcycle. We do huge, great chunks of it, and we do the movie, and then they send the actors over to us, and we do, put the actors into what we've shot. I show them a cut footage of the version. So we do huge amounts. So it's not just a second unit, it's actually a unit, standalone unit all on its own, and now it is stunt design, which is a wonderful, wonderful description of it.
And on that boat chase through the Thames, whose idea was it to have Pierce Brosnan and James Bond straighten his tie?
That was Pierce.
Yeah,
He put that in. It was so funny.
He comes out of the water and he straightens his tie.
He did underwater, yeah. He actually never told us he was doing it. We did his bit in the stage, and we dunked him down under there, and he just did that. There was his little nuance. It was just wonderful, great touch.
I should probably ask kind of a final question to wrap this up, because I think this is great, but I think we're way, way over time. But I'd like you to, if you had to pick one sequence or scene or stunt from your whole career that you're the most proud of, and tell us, maybe how you did it and how scared or scared you weren't, and what you did to design it.
There's been a lot, not bragging, but there's been a lot. And the thing about fear, I think the stuntman's greatest fear ever, I know mine is fear of failure. When you stand up there, you're the man on the stage, you've got 150, 200 crews standing behind camera looking at you, and obviously your friends, and you're going to probably wreck 250 grand's worth of real estate, maybe. If you get it wrong, his head's going to roll. But it's your fear of failure. You know you're psyched up, you know you can do the job. So cutting back to my favorite one, I've got to think probably Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Whenever I hear the tune, I'm humming it all day long. With jumping off the horse onto the tank. It's not the greatest stunt in the world, but it's, you've got to travel 18 feet sideways. You're dealing with a real horse, a real tank with tracks over the top. And I trained for a couple of months to get the horse to run in a straight line when I stood on the saddle, because we had to be close to the edge of the cliff, but not too close, so he didn't slip down between the tank and the cliff. And we had the manure heap. This is spent my life in SHIT. We'd make the manure heap, 100 yards long. I'd gallop the horse down there, and I'd just catch him unaware, stand up, and just make sure he ran straight. Well, I jumped, and I calculated, jumping onto flat ground, how by the time I got another 8 or 10 feet in the air to jump off the bank, how far I was going to travel, and things like that, And people said, "Did it wind you when you landed?" I said, "I have no idea."
Now, I always imagine when stunt people get together telling war stories, in my vision, it's like the scene in Jaws. We're on the boat and they start, showing each other scars and stuff like that. Do you guys, have a network where you're always getting together and, telling the war stories?
A lot, and a lot of whiskey drank.
A lot of whiskey going. Well, maybe I should probably end it now, because it's been great, and then they can file out of here, and you can kind of get on them and ask them for those war stories and bug them about that. You guys have all been utterly fantastic, and it's great that you guys get this spotlight from Ron Top, and I think it's great, fantastic. They did it. And thank you to you for listening.